Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High, and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Shalom, Israel. I am Brother Simeon, Israel, and welcome to today's Bible lesson. First and foremost, I'd like to start by giving all praises to the almighty power of my forefathers, the almighty power of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Today's lesson is part 1 of a 2-part series. This lesson is titled as The Weekly Sabbath, Assessing the Weekly Lunar Sabbath Cycle. In today's lesson, we will take an assessment of the Sun-Moon conjunction Lunar Sabbath doctrine. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 16 to 19, we see the following. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. Here we see the sun and the moon being created on the 4th day, a day that was made up of morning and evening during the creation. Furthermore, in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3, we see the following. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the 7th day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. The first weekly Sabbath day was on the 7th day of creation. This is where the concept of the Sabbath day starts. It is the 7-day cycle from the Most High's 7th day of rest, after the creation of the heaven and the earth and everything in it. Moreover, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 to 11, it reads thus, Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor, and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath day of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Indeed, the Sabbath is a hallowed day, when no work of any kind is to be done, and you're not supposed to employ anyone or animal to do any type of work on this day. The 7th day weekly Sabbath was given to the Israelites when they went into the wilderness. We see this in Exodus chapter 16, verses 4 to 5, which reads thus. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them, whether they will walk in my law or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. Continuing from verse 25. And Moses said, Eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field. 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. There is no mention in the Hebrew scriptures of a 7th day weekly Sabbath being observed by the Israelites or their ancestors before they were given the Sabbath law in the wilderness, when they were given the manna for food. This occurred before they received the Levitical laws. Furthermore, in Exodus chapter 31, verse 16, we see the following. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. Again, the weekly Sabbath commandment was given in the wilderness before receiving the laws at Mount Horeb. The weekly Sabbath commandment requires no burnt offerings and can be observed anywhere on earth throughout all generations. Our ancestors were commanded to work the first 6 days of the week and rest on the 7th day. The weekly Sabbath commandment is not the same as the weekly Sabbath feast of Leviticus chapter 23, verse 3. The 7-day cycle given to the Israelites in the wilderness by the Most High himself matches the original 7-day cycle from the Most High's 7th day of rest after the creation of the heaven and the earth and everything in it. The Most High taught the 7th day weekly Sabbath to the children of Israel just after they left Egypt by controlling the way manna fell during the 7-day week in the wilderness. Note that there is no astronomical basis given in the Hebrew scriptures for the 7-day weekly cycle. So how is the Leviticus 23 and 3 weekly Sabbath feast day observed? We see this in Numbers chapter 28 verse 9, which reads thus: "And on the Sabbath day 2 lambs of the first year without spot, and 2/10 deals of flour for a meat offering mingled with oil, and the drink offering thereof. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, beside the continual burnt offerings and his drink offering." Today, we have no temple, no Levitical priesthood, and we are not even in Zion, so we cannot assemble and keep the weekly 7th-day Sabbath feast. How and where the Most High requires it. But we can certainly keep the weekly Sabbath commandment. In the Lunar Sabbath doctrine, the new moon is defined as a lunar conjunction. During the lunar conjunction, the moon is typically not visible, and the first day of the month will always fall on the day of the new moon. Note that the period of time from new moon to new moon is 29.5 days long on average. Moreover, a lunar conjunction is defined as follows. A lunar conjunction is the event when the earth, moon, and sun, in that order, are approximately in a straight line. It is sometimes referred to as the new moon. Though traditionally and biblically, new moon refers to the observance by earth-bound individuals of the first visible crescent of rebuilding of moonlight. The period of time between 2 lunar conjunctions is the synodic month, which is a basic unit in most lunar and lunisolar calendars. Also important to note is that according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the synodic month, or complete cycle of phases of the moon as seen from Earth, averages 29.5 mean solar days in length. That is 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 3 seconds. Because of perturbations in the moon's orbits, the lengths of all astronomical months vary slightly. In the Lunar Sabbath doctrine, the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th day after the conjunction correspond with the 4 weekly lunar Sabbaths. That is, you'll have Sabbaths on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th of the month. But sometimes this doctrine dictates that the first day, which is the conjunction, is also a Sabbath. But this creates the scenario of a double Sabbath, since lunar months are always 29 or 30 days long, because the time between new moons are always on average 29.5 days. Even if you pick and choose whether the 29th of the month is a weekly Sabbath day to avoid the double weekly Sabbaths, sometimes you'll have 8 days between weekly Sabbaths instead of 7 days. We can easily assess this doctrine by asking the following questions. Was the new moon always a Sabbath in ancient Israel? Are there sometimes less than or more than 7 days between weekly Sabbaths? Is a conjunction a new moon from the ancient Israelite perspective? Firstly, Amos chapter 8 verses 4 to 5 reads as follows. Hear this, O ye that swallow up the needy, even to make the poor of the land to fail, saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn? And the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small, and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit. Now, in the Lunar Sabbath doctrine, this scripture in the King James Version Bible is used to justify always having a Sabbath on the new moon. Here we see the wicked market vendors eagerly waiting to deal unfairly with the children of Israel, but they have to wait for the passing of the new moon and the Sabbath to do so. We know no work of any kind is allowed on the Sabbath day. That will include market vending. But why do we have to wait for the new moon to pass? In other words, why would the markets be empty on every new moon? In Numbers chapter 10 verses 1 to 3, we see the following. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver. Of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Continuing at verse 10. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginning of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord, your God. It is a commandment that the children of Israel gather themselves together at the sanctuary on the new moon, that is, at the beginning of the month. But why? In Psalms chapter 81 verse 3, we see the following. Blow up the trumpets in the new moon, in the time appointed, on our solemn feast day. The new moon is a solemn feast day, wherein all the Israelites gather themselves together to make offerings, feast, rejoice, and praise the Most High, like every other feast day, when the trumpet is blown. Moreover, 1 Samuel chapter 20 verses 4 to 5 reads thus. Then said Jonathan unto David, Whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field unto the 3rd day at even. Here we see King David highlighting the importance of the solemn feast day on the new moon. But because he feared for his life, he fled instead of feasting with the king. And he could flee and hide on the new moon because it is not a Sabbath. Furthermore, Isaiah chapter 66 verse 23 reads as follows. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. It is prophesied by Isaiah that once the 3rd temple is rebuilt, all flesh shall gather themselves together before the Most High on the new moon, and also on the Sabbaths. The new moon is stated separately from the Sabbath because it is not a Sabbath. It is a solemn feast day without all the restrictions of a Sabbath day. But assembly of the congregation is a requirement. In addition, in Ezekiel chapter 46 verse 1, we see the following. Thus saith the Lord God, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and in the day of the new moon it shall be opened. Here we see the same prophecy again. The gates are open to welcome in the congregation. And again, the distinction is made between the new moon assembly and the Sabbath assembly. On the new moon, a gathering of the congregation is required to make offerings, feast, rejoice, and praise the Most High. But it is not a Sabbath. Only the memorial of blowing trumpets is celebrated once on the new moon in the 7th month. It is a Sabbath. This can be seen in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 24 to 25, which reads thus. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of the trumpets, and holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. But nowhere in the law of the Most High does it say that the new moon is always to be a Sabbath day. So back to the question, why would the markets be empty on every new moon? The answer simply is, the trumpet was blown and the congregation was assembled at the temple for a solemn feast. It is a commandment of the Most High. The next point we need to address is, are there sometimes less than or more than 7 days between weekly Sabbaths? In round 6 of the great debate, entitled, Is the False God Found in the Volume of the Book?, we saw how the Septuagint can be used to reveal the lies found in the Christian Bible, as the Septuagint was written over 250 years before the birth of the false god and 1,000 years before the Masoretic text translation. The Septuagint was translated from the original Hebrew into ancient Greek for the Israelites living in Egypt at that time. The Septuagint was not translated by or for followers of Christianity or Judaism. The Septuagint is devoid of any religious influence from Christianity or Judaism. It is a perfectly objective historical witness that will be useful in answering key questions. In the King James Bible, Leviticus chapter 23 verses 9 to 11 reads thus, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. After reaping the harvest, a sheaf of the first fruits of that harvest is brought to the priest as a wave offering. The wave offering is made the day after the Sabbath. Now let us see how verse 15 compares in the Septuagint to clarify the confusion created by the weekly Lunar Sabbath doctrine. In the King James Bible, verse 15 reads thus, And he shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that he brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall he number 50 days, and he shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. The teachers of the Lunar Sabbath doctrine claim that the word even in verse 16 in the King James Bible implies adding an additional 50 days to the 7 lunar Sabbaths that passed. So according to them, it's not saying that after 7 lunar Sabbaths that 49 days would have passed. Keep in mind that their doctrine creates something called a double weekly lunar Sabbath, or 8 days between weekly Sabbaths, depending on how they manipulate it. Let's see what the Septuagint says, starting at verse 15. And ye shall number to yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day on which ye shall offer the sheaf of the heave offering, 7 full weeks, until the morrow after the last week ye shall number 50 days, and shall bring a new meat offering to the Lord. This scripture in the Septuagint is clearly saying, from the day the heave offering is made, you shall count 7 weeks and keep counting until the day after the last week. That day ye shall number as 50 days total after the Sabbath that fell before the last heave offering. Now let's do some simple arithmetic. 7 weeks plus 1 day is equal to 50 days. Therefore, 7 weeks is equal to 49 days. Hence, 1 week is equal to 7 days. According to Levitical law, 1 week is 7 days. Also, an Israelite week is defined as 6 days of work and rest on the 7th day, as seen earlier in Exodus chapter 20 verse 9 and Exodus chapter 16 verse 26. So, in the King James Bible, the word even does not mean add 50 more days. It is simply saying after 7 weekly Sabbaths have passed, the day after the last weekly Sabbath will be numbered 50 days since the Sabbath that preceded the wave offering. It is saying the same thing as the Septuagint translation. There are always 7 days between weekly Sabbaths. Now let's take a look at point number 3. Is a conjunction a new moon from the ancient Israelite perspective? According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the Sumerians were probably the first to develop a calendar based entirely on the reoccurrence of lunar phases. Each Sumero-Babylonian month began on the first day of visibility of the new moon, although an intercalary month was used periodically. Intercalations were haphazard, inserted when the royal astrologers realized that the calendar had fallen severely out of step with the seasons. We have already seen that a conjunction is invisible to the human eye. Therefore, the original definition of a new moon could not be the conjunction, but rather the first bit of visibility after the conjunction, that is, the first visible waxing crescent. This is how the ancients defined the new moon. The Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary defines intercalary as something inserted in a calendar, for example, an intercalary day, or of a year containing an intercalary period, such as a day or month within that year. In addition, the Sumerians use a calendar wherein each month begins when a new crescent moon was first sighted low on the western horizon at sunset. Counting from the new moon, every 7th day was a day of rest, and in most months a full moon at the middle of the month, and a 50% illuminated moon 1/4 and 3/4 of the way through the month. Moreover, Ur of the Chaldeans was a very special place in Israelite history. This photo shows the ruins of Ur in modern Iraq. The current scholarly consensus for the city of Ur Kasdim, commonly translated as Ur of the Chaldeans. In 1927, Leonard Woolley excavated the site and identified it as a Sumerian archaeological site where the Chaldeans were to settle around the 9th century BC. Now we'll see why Ur of the Chaldeans in the land of Sumeria is so important. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 1 and 7, we see the following. After these things the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield, and thy exceeding great reward. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of the Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it. Abraham and his family would have been familiar with the idea of a month starting on the day of the first new crescent after the sun-moon conjunction, where the moon is invisible. Abraham grew up in the Ur of the Chaldees, within Sumerian territory. Furthermore, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the Egyptian calendar was defined as follows. The Egyptian lunar calendar, the older of the two systems, consisted of 12 months whose duration differed according to the length of a full lunar cycle, which was normally 29 or 30 days. Each lunar month began with the new moon, reckoned from the first morning after the waning crescent had become invisible, and was named after the major festivals celebrated within it. Since the lunar calendar was 10 or 11 days shorter than the solar year, a 13th month called Tut was intercalated every several years to keep the lunar calendar in rough correspondence with the agricultural seasons and their feasts. The ancient definition of a new month is the first morning after the night of the sun-moon conjunction where there is no visible moon. That is, the morning after the waning crescent is gone and the moon is not visible. The morning after the conjunction is typically the first day of a visible waxing crescent. And this definition of the new moon is what the Israelites would have grown accustomed to after spending hundreds of years in ancient Egypt. As a reminder, we see that a lunar conjunction is sometimes seen as a new moon, but traditionally and biblically, a new moon refers to the observance by earth-bound individuals of the first visible waxing crescent of moonlight. Moreover, the Oxford English Dictionary defines a new moon as the phase of the moon when it first appears as a slender crescent shortly after its conjunction with the sun. This definition matches the original interpretation of the new moon that was observed by ancient cultures, such as with the Sumerian and Egyptian lunar calendars. So no, a conjunction is not a new moon from the ancient Israelite perspective. This lunar weekly Sabbath doctrine is deeply flawed. In conclusion, the lunar weekly Sabbath is not biblical. we have seen that the Lunar Sabbath doctrine conflicts with Levitical law. Also, we have seen that the new moon is not always a Sabbath, and the conjunction was not always defined as a new moon in ancient times. In addition, we saw that the Israelite weekly Sabbath is based on a non-astronomical weekly system that was given to them in the wilderness in Exodus chapter 16, verses 25 to 26. And finally, there is no record of a lunar weekly Sabbath in the Hebrew scriptures. Well, stay tuned for part 2, where we'll carefully investigate the ancient Israelite weekly Sabbath cycle. That's all for now, folks.